The knock came late, a hesitant tap against my bedroom door that jolted me from the haze of a sleepless night. I froze, my heart hammering as the clock glowed 2:17 a.m., the Seattle rain drumming softly against the window. Who could it be, here in this quiet house, where secrets seem to linger like ghosts in the walls? I'm Elias Torres, 46, a graphic designer who traded New York's chaos for the misty calm of the Pacific Northwest. After my husband, David, passed 3 years ago, I thought love was a door forever closed. I'd built a life here with my stepson, Caleb, 22, who'd been part of David's world long before I entered it. Caleb was the all-American kid, baseball star, charming grin, the kind of guy who'd never seemed to notice the quiet ache I carried. But that night, as I opened the door, his shadowed face told me something had shifted. "Elias, can we talk?" His voice was low, unsteady, not the confident drawl I knew. He stood in the doorway, his broad shoulders hunched, wearing a faded University of Washington hoodie. His hazel eyes, usually so sure, flickered with something raw, fear, maybe, or a truth too heavy to hold alone. "Caleb, it's late," I said, my voice softer than I meant, betraying the worry curling in my chest. "What's wrong?" He stepped inside, closing the door behind him, and the room felt smaller, the air charged with an unspoken weight. "I need to tell you something," he said, his hands fidgeting. "Something I've never told anyone." The house on Capitol Hill was our sanctuary, a craftsman-style haven with creaky floors and a view of Puget Sound on clear days. David and I had bought it a decade ago, dreaming of a life filled with laughter and late-night talks. When he died, cancer, merciless and swift, Caleb and I clung to each other, two strangers bound by grief. He was 19 then, a freshman at UW, and I was a widower trying to parent a kid who didn't quite see me as family. Caleb had always been straight, or so I thought. He'd dated girls in high school, brought home a cheerleader named Mia last summer, and never blinked at the fact that his dad and I were married. He was the kind of guy who'd shrug and say, "Love's love, you know?" But that night, as he sat on the edge of my bed, his words unraveled everything I thought I knew. "I've been lying to everyone," he said, staring at the floor. "To you, to Mia, to myself." He swallowed hard, his jaw tight. I'm not who I've been pretending to be." I sat across from him, the mattress dipping under my weight, and waited. My heart was a drumbeat, loud and unsteady. I'd spent years hiding my own truth. Growing up in a conservative Puerto Rican family, I'd learned to bury my feelings deep. But Caleb? He was the golden boy, the one who fit in everywhere. What could he possibly be hiding? "I think I'm gay," he said finally, the words tumbling out like they'd been caged too long. "No, I know I am. And I'm terrified, Elias." The room spun for a moment, not because I was shocked by his truth, but because of the vulnerability in his voice. This wasn't just a confession, it was a plea. I reached out, my hand hovering before resting on his shoulder. "Caleb," I said, "you're safe here. You know that, right?" He looked up, eyes glistening. "I don't know how to do this. I've spent my whole life being the guy everyone expects. Strong, straight, perfect. What happens when they find out I'm not?" The next morning, Seattle was draped in its usual gray, the kind of sky that made you want to stay inside with coffee and regrets. Caleb and I sat at the kitchen table, the silence between us heavy but not uncomfortable. He'd stayed in my room until dawn, spilling years of hidden feelings, crushes on teammates, late-night searches for answers, the suffocating pressure to be someone he wasn't. "I didn't want to disappoint Dad," he said, stirring his coffee absently. "Or you. You could never disappoint me," I said, and I meant it. But I saw the weight he carried, the fear of a world that might not accept him. I knew that fear too well, the taunts from my cousins, the sermons that called people like me sinners. I'd fought those battles, but Caleb was just starting. That afternoon, we walked to a coffee shop on 15th Avenue, a cozy spot called the Brood Awakening. It was neutral ground, a place to talk away from the ghosts of our house. The barista, a non-binary person named Riley with a shock of blue hair, greeted us with a warm smile. Caleb seemed to relax, his shoulders loosening as we ordered lattes and found a corner table. "I met someone," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "His name's Julian. He's a grad student at UW in the art department. I think I'm falling for him." My heart did a strange flip, pride, worry, and something else I couldn't name. "Tell me about him," I said, leaning forward. Caleb's face lit up, a spark I hadn't seen in years. He's 25, Korean American, with this quiet confidence. He paints these incredible abstracts, like he's pouring his soul onto the canvas. We met at a gallery event last month, and I can't stop thinking about him. I listened, watching the way his hands moved as he spoke, animated and alive. But beneath the excitement, I saw the tension. His fear of what this meant for his future, his friends, his identity. I wanted to protect him, to shield him from the world's judgment, but I knew I couldn't. All I could do was be here, steady and present. That evening, back at the house, Caleb showed me a photo on his phone. Julian was striking. Sharp cheekbones, dark eyes that seemed to hold 1,000 stories, and a half smile that felt like a secret. They'd been texting for weeks, Caleb said, but he hadn't worked up the courage to ask Julian out. "What if he doesn't feel the same?" he asked, his voice small. "Then you'll survive," I said, remembering my own heartbreaks. "But you won't know until you try." He nodded, but the doubt lingered. I thought of David, how he'd always known what to say to Caleb, how he'd been the bridge between us. Without him, I was stumbling through this, hoping I was enough. Over the next few days, Caleb grew quieter, lost in his thoughts. I caught him staring at his phone, rereading Julian's messages, second-guessing every word he typed. I wanted to shake him, to tell him to leap before fear stopped him, but I knew he had to find his own way. One night, as we watched a movie in the living room, he turned to me. "Elias, how did you know Dad was the one?" The question caught me off guard, a knife twisting in old wounds. I set down my beer, the memory of David's laugh filling the room like a ghost. "I didn't," I admitted. "Not at first. But he made me feel seen, like every part of me, good and bad, was enough." Caleb nodded, his eyes distant. "I want that," he said softly. "I want to be enough for someone." "You will be," I said, my voice thick. "You already are." By the end of the week, Caleb made a decision. He texted Julian, asking him to meet at the Brood Awakening on Saturday. I watched him pace the kitchen, his nerves electric, and I felt a strange mix of pride and fear. This was his first step into a new world, one I knew could be beautiful but also brutal. As he left for the coffee shop, I called after him, "You've got this, Caleb." He flashed a nervous grin, the same one David used to give me when he was up to something brave. "Thanks, Elias," he said, "for everything." I stood at the window, watching him disappear into the Seattle mist, my heart heavy with hope and worry. I didn't know what would happen next, but I knew one thing. Caleb was stepping into his truth, and I'd be there, no matter what came. Caleb came home that night with a glow I hadn't seen before, his steps lighter, his smile unguarded. The Brood Awakening had worked its magic. Julian had said yes to a date, and Caleb was floating. "He's even better in person," he told me, sprawling on the couch, his voice bubbling with excitement. "We talked for hours, Elias. Hours." I leaned against the counter, sipping tea to hide my relief. "So, what's he like when he's not just a photo?" Caleb laughed, a sound so rare it felt like a gift. He's funny, but not in a loud way. Like, he'll say something sharp and you don't realize it's hilarious until a second later. And he listens, really listens. He paused, his expression softening. I told him about Dad, about you. He got it. I nodded, my chest tight. David's absence was a constant ache, but hearing Caleb talk about him with someone new felt like a small victory. Sounds like a keeper, I said, keeping my tone light. Yeah, Caleb said, then hesitated. But I'm still scared. What if I mess this up? You won't, I said, though I knew life didn't come with guarantees. Just be you. That's enough. The next week was a whirlwind. Caleb and Julian started texting constantly, their conversations spilling into late-night calls. I'd hear Caleb's muffled laughter through the walls, and it brought a warmth to the house I hadn't felt in years. But there was tension too. Caleb hadn't told his friends about Julian or about himself. He was still carrying the weight of his old life, the one where he was the straight jock with the perfect girlfriend. One evening, I found him in the backyard, staring at the stars. The air was crisp, the kind of Seattle night that made you feel small and infinite all at once. You okay? I asked, sitting beside him on the damp grass. He shrugged, his jaw tight. I ran into Mia today. She asked why I've been distant. I didn't know what to say. Mia, the cheerleader with the megawatt smile, who'd spent last summer charming us over backyard barbecues. I'd liked her, but I'd also seen how Caleb's eyes never lit up around her the way they did when he talked about Julian. You could tell her the truth, I said carefully. Or not. It's your call. He shook his head. She'd hate me. Her family's super conservative. And my teammate's God, Elias, they'd lose it. I wanted to argue, to tell him the world had changed. But I knew better. Even in progressive Seattle, coming out could be a battlefield. You don't have to tell everyone at once, I said. Start small. Tell the people who matter most. He looked at me, his eyes searching. Like you. I smiled, nudging his shoulder. You already did that part. The first date happened on a rainy Saturday at Pike Place Market. Caleb was a nervous wreck, changing shirts 3 times before settling on a navy sweater I'd bought him last Christmas. Do I look okay? He asked, fidgeting in the hallway. You look like you, I said. That's more than okay. He met Julian at the market, where they wandered through stalls of flowers and fresh fish, dodging tourists and sharing a bag of warm donuts. Caleb told me later it was perfect. Julian's easy laugh, the way their shoulders brushed as they walked, the moment Julian grabbed his hand to pull him out of the rain. But perfection is fragile, and Caleb's world was about to crack. That night he got a text from Mia. She'd seen him at the market holding hands with Julian. Her message was short but sharp. Who was that guy? Are you cheating on me? Caleb stared at his phone, his face pale, and I knew the storm was coming. I have to tell her, he said, his voice hollow, but I don't know how. We sat at the kitchen table drafting a response. I suggested honesty, but Caleb was terrified of hurting her. In the end, he wrote, Mia, I'm sorry. I'm figuring myself out right now. Can we talk in person? She agreed, and they met the next day at a park near campus. I waited at home, pacing, my phone clutched in my hand. When Caleb returned, his eyes were red but his shoulders were straighter. She was hurt, he said, but she listened. She said she needs time, but she doesn't hate me. I pulled him into a hug, feeling the weight of his courage. You did good, kid. But the ripples didn't stop with Mia. Word spread as it always does. One of Caleb's teammates, a guy named Trevor, confronted him at practice. What's this I hear about you and some dude? Trevor asked, his voice loud enough for the whole locker room to hear. Caleb froze, his carefully built world crumbling. I'm still me, Caleb said, his voice steady despite the tremor in his hands. Just figuring out who that is. Trevor scoffed, and a few others joined in, their laughter sharp and cruel. But one teammate, a quiet guy named Marcus, stepped up. "Leave him alone," Marcus said. "He's still Caleb." It wasn't much, but it was enough to get Caleb through the day. When he told me about it, his voice cracked. "I thought they'd all turn on me," he admitted. "But Marcus, he had my back." I nodded, remembering the allies I'd found when I came out. Small beacons in a dark sea. "You'll find more Marcuses," I said. "And the ones who don't get it? They're not your people." Caleb and Julian's second date was quieter. A hike in the Olympic National Forest. They talked about everything: art, family, the future. Julian shared his own story, growing up in a strict household where being gay wasn't an option. "I didn't come out until college," he told Caleb. "It was like breathing for the first time." Caleb came home that night with a new kind of hope, one tempered by reality but stronger for it. He was starting to see a life where he could be himself, not just the version everyone else wanted. But as he smiled, telling me about Julian's terrible sense of direction, I saw the shadow of fear still lingering. Coming out wasn't a single moment. It was a journey, and Caleb was only at the beginning. The weeks that followed were a tightrope walk. Caleb was falling hard for Julian, their dates becoming a rhythm of coffee shops, art galleries, and late-night drives along the coast. But every step toward authenticity came with a cost. His baseball team was a minefield now. Some teammates, like Marcus, were supportive, but others whispered behind his back. Trevor's taunts grew sharper, and Caleb started skipping practices, claiming he was just tired. I watched him retreat, the spark in his eyes dimming. One night, I found him in the garage, tinkering with an old bike David used to ride. "You okay?" I asked, leaning against the doorway. He didn't look up. "I don't know if I can keep doing this, Elias. The team, my friends, it's like I'm losing everything." I knelt beside him, the smell of grease and metal grounding me. "You're not losing everything. You're finding yourself. That's worth more than a few assholes who can't handle it." He gave a half smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. What if I lose Julian too? What if I'm not enough for him? I wanted to promise him it would all work out, but life had taught me better. Instead, I said, "You're enough for you. Start there." Julian was becoming a fixture in our lives. He came over for dinner one night, bringing a bottle of wine and a shy smile. He was exactly as Caleb described, quietly confident, with a quick wit and a warmth that filled the room. We ate pasta on the back porch, the Seattle skyline glittering in the distance, and I saw the way Julian looked at Caleb, like he was the only person in the world. "You're a designer, right?" Julian asked me, his dark eyes curious. "Caleb showed me your portfolio. It's incredible." I waved off the compliment, but it felt good. "Thanks. I've been at it a long time. What about you? Caleb says your paintings are something else." Julian blushed, a rare crack in his calm demeanor. "I try. Art's my way of making sense of things." Caleb watched us, his expression soft, and I realized this was the first time since David's death that our house felt like a home again. But the warmth was fleeting. Later that night, Caleb got a call from his coach. Trevor had spread rumors, and now the team was divided. The coach wanted Caleb to clear things up or step back. "They can't kick you off for being gay," I said, anger flaring. "That's illegal." "It's not that simple," Caleb said, his voice hollow. "They'll find a reason. Missed practices, attitude, whatever. I'm the problem now." The next day, Caleb and Julian went to an art exhibit downtown, a temporary escape from the storm. The gallery was packed, all sleek lines and soft lighting, with Julian's work featured in a corner display. Caleb sent me a photo of them in front of a vibrant abstract painting, Julian's arm around his waist, both of them smiling. The caption read, "He's amazing." But trouble followed them. Trevor and a few teammates showed up at the gallery, drunk and loud. "Yo, Caleb," Trevor called, his voice cutting through the crowd. "Didn't know you were into this artsy crap now." Caleb froze, his hand slipping from Julian's. I wasn't there, but he told me later how Julian stepped forward, calm but firm. "You got a problem?" Julian asked, his voice steady. Trevor laughed, but the crowd's attention made him back off. Caleb and Julian left soon after, the night tainted. When Caleb got home, he was quiet, his confidence shaken. "I should have said something," he told me. "I just stood there." "You don't have to fight every battle," I said. "Julian had your back. That's what matters." The tension with the team came to a head at the next practice. Trevor shoved Caleb during a drill, muttering a slur under his breath. Caleb snapped, shoving back, and suddenly they were on the ground, fists flying. Marcus and another teammate pulled them apart, but the damage was done. The coach benched Caleb for the next game, citing disruptive behavior. That night, Caleb sat in the living room, staring at his baseball glove like it was a relic from another life. Julian came over, his presence a quiet anchor. They sat on the couch, Julian's hand resting on Caleb's knee, and I gave them space, retreating to my studio. I heard them talking softly, Julian's voice steady and warm. "You don't have to keep playing," he said. "Not if it costs you this much." "But it's who I am," Caleb said, his voice breaking. "Or who I was." "You're more than baseball," Julian replied. "You're you, and that's enough." I paused at the top of the stairs, my heart aching. Julian was giving Caleb what I tried to offer. Acceptance, unfiltered and true. But I also knew Caleb's struggle wasn't over. He was losing pieces of his old life, and the new one was still taking shape. The next morning, Caleb made a choice. He went to the coach and quit the team. "I'm done pretending," he told me later, his voice steady for the first time in weeks. "I want to be someone I'm proud of." I hugged him, tears prickling my eyes. "You already are." He spent the day with Julian, helping him set up for a new exhibit. They painted together in Julian's tiny apartment, laughing as they got more paint on themselves than the canvas. Caleb came home that night with a streak of blue on his cheek and a lightness I hadn't seen in months. But as he talked about Julian, I saw a new worry in his eyes. "He's so sure of himself," Caleb said. "What if I can't keep up? What if I'm too messed up for him?" I thought of David, how he'd loved me through my own doubts. "You don't have to be perfect," I said. "Just be honest. He'll meet you there." Caleb nodded, but I knew the fear lingered. Love was a risk, and he was learning just how high the stakes could be. Spring arrived in Seattle, tentative and green, like Caleb's newfound courage. He and Julian were inseparable now, their relationship a quiet rebellion against the world's noise. They'd spend weekends exploring the city, ferry rides to Bainbridge, late-night tacos at food trucks, stolen kisses under cherry blossoms. But the scars from Caleb's old life lingered. He'd lost friends, his place on the team, and a piece of the identity he'd clung to for years. One afternoon, I found him in the kitchen, staring at a letter from his mom, David's ex-wife. She lived in Texas, a world away from our progressive bubble. "She wants me to visit," Caleb said, his voice tight. "But I don't know if I can tell her." I sat across from him, the letter between us like a ticking bomb. "You don't have to tell her yet," I said. "But if you do, you'll know you're living your truth, no matter what she thinks." He nodded, but the fear in his eyes was familiar. I'd faced it too, coming out to my own family decades ago. My mother had cried, my father had walked away, and it took years to rebuild. I didn't want that for Caleb, but I knew he had to face it himself. Julian was his anchor. They planned a trip to Portland, a weekend getaway to an art festival. Caleb was nervous, not about Julian but about being seen together in a new city. "What if someone recognizes me?" he asked me the night before they left. "Then you hold your head high," I said. "You're not hiding anymore." The trip was a turning point. Caleb sent me photos, him and Julian laughing in a sculpture garden, their hands intertwined. Julian sketching by the river, Caleb watching with a soft smile. When they returned, Caleb was different, lighter, like he'd shed another layer of fear. But the world has a way of testing you. A week later, Caleb got a call from his mom. She'd heard rumors, probably from Mia's family, who still had ties to hers. "Is it true?" she asked, her voice sharp over the phone. "Are you with a guy?" Caleb froze, his phone trembling in his hand. I was in the next room, pretending to read, but I heard every word. "Yeah, Mom," he said finally. "I'm gay." The silence was deafening. Then came the tears, the accusations. How could he do this to her, to their family's reputation? Caleb stayed calm, his voice steady, but when he hung up, he looked shattered. "She said she needs time," he told me, his eyes hollow, but it felt like she was saying goodbye. I pulled him into a hug, wishing I could absorb his pain. "She might come around," I said, "but even if she doesn't, you've got a family here." Julian was there that night, bringing takeout and a quiet strength. They sat on the porch, talking until the stars came out. I watched from the kitchen, my heart full and aching. Julian was good for Caleb, but I worried about the weight Caleb carried, the fear that he wasn't enough. The next day, Caleb decided to fight for himself. He reached out to Marcus, his old teammate, and a few others who'd stayed quiet but hadn't turned on him. They met at a diner, and to Caleb's surprise, most of them listened. "I didn't expect them to get it," he told me later. "But they said they just want me to be happy." It wasn't perfect. Some friendships were gone for good. But it was a start. Caleb was rebuilding piece by piece. He started volunteering at a local LGBTQ center, helping kids who were struggling with their own truths. It gave him purpose, a way to turn his pain into something meaningful. One evening, Julian invited us to his art studio, a cramped space filled with canvases and the smell of paint. He'd been working on a piece for Caleb, a vibrant abstract of blues and golds that seemed to pulse with life. "It's you," Julian said, his voice shy. "All the colors you're finally letting out." Caleb stared at the painting, tears in his eyes. "I don't deserve you," he whispered. Julian took his hand. "You deserve everything." I stood back, feeling like an intruder in their moment. But Caleb turned to me, his smile wide. "Elias, you should paint something too." I laughed, shaking my head. "I'm a designer, not an artist." "Same thing," Julian said, handing me a brush. "Just let go." So I did. We spent the night painting, laughing, making a mess. For the first time in years, I felt light, like the grief I'd carried since David's death was loosening its grip. Caleb was finding his way, and somehow he was helping me find mine too. But love, like life, isn't a straight line. Caleb and Julian hit a rough patch when Julian got an offer to study abroad in Paris for a semester. It was a dream opportunity, but it meant leaving Caleb behind. "I don't want to hold him back," Caleb told me, his voice thick with emotion. "But I'm terrified of losing him." I remembered the long-distance stretches with David, the late-night calls and the ache of absence. "If it's real, you'll make it work," I said. "But you have to talk to him." Caleb nodded, and that night, he and Julian had a long, tearful conversation. They decided to try to trust in what they'd built. It wasn't easy, but it was honest. And in that honesty, Caleb found a strength he didn't know he had. Summer came, and with it a quiet resolution. Julian left for Paris, and Caleb threw himself into his new life. He enrolled in an art history class inspired by Julian and started working part-time at the Brood Awakening, where Riley became a fast friend. The coffee shop became his refuge, a place where he could be himself without fear. But the past wasn't done with him. His mom reached out asking to meet. She was visiting Seattle for a conference, and Caleb agreed, though his nerves were raw. They met at a quiet cafe downtown, and I waited at home, my stomach in knots. When he returned, he was quiet but not broken. She didn't apologize, he said. But she listened. She said she's trying to understand. It wasn't a fairy tale reconciliation, but it was a start. I hugged him, proud of the man he was becoming. You're doing the hard stuff, I said. That's what counts. Caleb and Julian made long-distance work, their love growing through late-night video calls and handwritten letters. Julian sent sketches from Paris, each one a piece of his heart. Caleb hung them in his room, a reminder that love could cross oceans. One night, Caleb invited me to the LGBTQ Center for an event, a talent show for queer youth. He'd helped organize it, and I saw him in his element, cheering on kids as they sang and danced. Riley was there too, performing a spoken-word piece that brought the room to tears. I realized Caleb had found a community, a place where he belonged. After the show, we walked home under a rare starry sky. I'm okay, Caleb said, unprompted. For the first time, I feel like I'm going to be okay. I smiled, my heart full. You're more than okay. You're incredible. Months later, Julian returned from Paris. Caleb met him at the airport, and I got a text later that night. A photo of them embracing, Julian's face buried in Caleb's shoulder. The caption read, "Home." They came over for dinner the next night, and the house was alive again, filled with laughter and stories of Paris. Julian had brought a small painting for me, a quiet landscape that felt like a thank you for being there for him, he said when Caleb was out of earshot. I'd do it 1,000,000 times over, I replied, my voice thick. As we ate, I watched them, Julian's hand on Caleb's easy smile. They were young, still figuring it out, but they had something real. And I realized I'd found something too. Not just a stepson, but a son, a friend, a reminder that love could rebuild what grief had broken. The next spring, Caleb and Julian moved in together, a small apartment near campus. I helped them pack, my heart a mix of pride and nostalgia. The house felt empty without Caleb, but it was a good empty, the kind that comes when someone you love is ready to fly. On their last night in the house, we sat on the porch, the Seattle skyline glowing in the distance. Caleb turned to me, his eyes steady. You saved me, Elias, he said. Not just that night I came to your room, but every day since. I shook my head, tears prickling. You saved yourself, Caleb. I just held the door open. He hugged me, and for a moment, I felt David there too, his warmth in the air between us. Caleb had found his truth, his love, his place in the world. And in helping him, I'd found a piece of myself I thought I'd lost forever. As they drove away the next morning, I stood at the window, watching their car disappear into the mist. The house was quiet, but my heart was full. Love, I realized, wasn't just a moment. It was a journey, one that could surprise you when you least expected it.